So let's, kind of as we think of why fathers, why do they matter, why so much attention to the issue, just one big data point that's kind of important to have in mind is that 80%, more or less, of the world's men will be biological fathers at some point in their lives. And I think it's fair to say the other 20% have some connections. They've got somebody they need to care for, whether it's a child or a parent or someone else. And so while we've got lots of men who may feel like they can hide behind the desk, the newspaper, the whatever object is in their hand that's their tool of work, that really this matters for all men just as it matters for women. How do we plant the seeds of being empathetic and caring? We know from the child development field that kind of any indicator we look at, cognitive development, social achievement, emotional development, lower household poverty, men's participation matters. Now, a lot of these studies confound, or at least we try to make the case, or some researchers try to make the case that there's a special effect of fathers, that fathers teach boys how to be real men, or kind of a certain kind of masculinity, or that boys need fathers for male role models. My take on the data, and I think a lot of us gravitate and say, children need caregivers, and children don't really care about the genitalia of the caregivers. They need caregivers. One fantastic caregiver is great. Two fantastic caregivers is better. 3, 4, wow, then we're talking, then we're talking a Roots of Empathy classroom, for example. That the special thing that fathers bring is by being an involved caregiver. And that while we'd like, and sometimes we do want to nudge fathers that we need you to be there specially because you bring something different, mostly we want to say we need you there in the hands-on caregiving. And that the effects that we see of all these benefits are not because you're male or female, they are there because you were an involved caregiver. It certainly matters, and one of the biggest ones is that you bring your income home. And one of the issues we see in the Global South, and a huge issue to work on, is how do we get men to bring more of their income home? In households living on the edge of poverty, we're doing a lot of investment globally in women's economic empowerment, but we can't let men off the hook by continuing to say it's okay if you don't bring most of your income home. So we try to look at the issue of effects on child development to say it's not necessarily that you bring some masculine way of caregiving, it's that we need you on board as a fully involved caregiver. And I think again and again the findings show that fathers matter as much in the lives of children as mothers do, if, and this is a big if and when men are doing the caregiving. Now, if I say this at home, my wife will say, no way. My mother-in-law will say, no way. My mother will say, we've got a lot of cultural notions that mothers are the innate caregivers because mothers are doing 2 to 10 times the amount of the daily care of children around the world. Of course, you matter more. That time matters. And so what we're trying to do is to say, but if we get men to do the equal amount of time and participate in the daily nurturing, that really our roles become much more horizontal. We've learned a lot by reading studies from same-sex couples who don't come to the table with this baggage. That research is quite telling in the sense that these roles are much more fluid. For 1 year, I'm off and you're the full-time caregiver, and then we switch a year from now. And at the end of the day, there's not the expectation of who changes diapers and who does this. The fluidity is something that we're finding in egalitarian heterosexual couples, but we could learn a little bit from how some same-sex couples have been living this. One of the things that we feel compelled to mention now and then is precisely that. If one looks at, say, the UN Agency for Children's Rights, the United Nations Children's Fund, if many of you know the logo, there's a mother and a child. Many of our child development programs, much of our children's services have a notion that mothers are the innate caregivers. So I find myself having to repeat this a lot, that actually fathers can do this stuff. Everywhere we have the data, whether we say there's no biologically based difference in terms of being able to care, and I think that's a really important issue to start early on, that boys and girls can learn this and do it. There seem to be no biologically based differences between the sexes in terms of the responsiveness to a child's needs. There's even some of the interesting hormonal studies that are coming out showing that men in close contact with small children have similar hormonal changes that women do in breastfeeding. Different intensity, different mix, but showing that we are as biologically wired for care as men as women are. Again, differences that come along with breastfeeding and the hormonal effects of that. But the rest suggests that we are actually capable of it, but that we as a species don't do all that much to encourage our males of the species to do this well.